In Oklahoma last night, an execution went terribly wrong after the state tried a new, untested combination of drugs in what was supposed to be a lethal injection. 38-year-old Clayton Lockett, convicted of shooting a 19-year-old girl and watching as friends buried her alive, wound up dying from a heart attack in what onlookers described as a gruesome process that took far longer than expected. As a result, the execution of another convicted killer, which was supposed to take place 2 hours after Lockett's, was put on hold by Oklahoma's Republican governor. Today, the White House press secretary deplored what happened.
We have a fundamental standard in this country that even when the death penalty is justified, it must be carried out humanely. And I think everyone would recognize that this case fell short of that standard.
Later in the day, Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin said the state is launching an investigation. She said it will try to determine Lockett's cause of death and whether the Department of Corrections followed appropriate protocols and make recommendations to improve standards going forward. But Governor Fallin also defended the state's death penalty law.
He had his day in court. I believe the legal process worked. I believe the death penalty is an appropriate response and punishment to those who commit heinous crimes against their fellow men and women.
We explore some of the questions raised by this incident about the types of drugs used in lethal injections and whether states can carry them out while keeping with the constitutional requirement that they not be cruel and unusual. And for that, we turn to Deborah Denno. She's a professor at Fordham University's School of Law in New York. And Englert. He practices law in Washington, D.C., and he has defended Kentucky's lethal injection law before the Supreme Court. And also joining us is a reporter who's been covering this story. She is Carrie Aspinwall of the Tulsa World. Carrie Aspinwall, let me begin with you. You were in the building when the execution was supposed to take place. And you were not in the room to watch it, but you were nearby. What did you see? What was the reaction of those who were there at the time?
We were all in the media center, which is just adjacent to where the H unit is, where they house the death row inmates and where the execution chamber is. And we were all waiting. They take the media witnesses to the H unit in little minivans just around the corner. And normally those minivans return with the media witnesses. If the execution starts at 6, they're back by 6:30 at the latest, even after going through security and everything. So as we were waiting in the media center, as 6:30 rolled by, 6:45, and then 7, we began to become very concerned about what was going on in there and what, in this case, my editor and our peers in the media and everyone was witnessing.
And did you talk to some of the people who witnessed what happened afterward?
Yes, we immediately started reporting what they had seen and what they had done. As a media witness pool, they ask you to come back and report to the other members what happened. A lot of us were set to watch the 8 p.m. execution that was supposed to take place that didn't. That's the one I was there to witness. But we immediately reported what they had seen and done. And at the time, they had been rushed out of there with the curtain closed. They didn't know where he stood, if Mr. Lockett was still alive, if he was being worked on or rushed to the hospital. So they were just reporting what they had seen, which was that he was on the gurney as late as 6:30, 6:39, still writhing, grimacing, making noises. He was able to lift his head and shoulders off the gurney. And at this point, he was supposed to be heavily sedated.
And did the reporters and others who witnessed this compare it to other executions they'd seen?
Yes, they did, and we all did. I've witnessed several in Oklahoma myself, and none of them have ever been like that. Some of the people who witnessed Mr. Lockett's had never seen an execution before, and this was their first one. But we had several veteran reporters there, including my editor, Ziva Brandstetter, who'd witnessed several, and this was unprecedented in terms of length and what happened once they gave the drugs.
Well, let me bring in Professor Deborah Denno now joining us. She's with Fordham University Law School. What is your understanding of what happened here? What went wrong?
Well, it will be hard to know until they have an independent investigation of what went wrong, but it seems clear that this is not what was supposed to happen. Most lethal injections take place, if they're done correctly, within about 4 to 5 minutes. You're not going to have the writhing that was described or an inmate who's showing signs of conscious awareness as Mr. Lockett was doing. So this was not supposed to happen.
Roy Englert, what's your sense of it? We know there had been a big debate in the state of Oklahoma before this happened, the courts ruling one way, the governor pushing back, and a lot of this had to do with the fact, as we reported, that this was a combination of drugs that hadn't been tried before.
Well, there will have to be an investigation into exactly what went wrong, but the preliminary report is that they had difficulty finding a vein or that a vein exploded. That is a known danger with the first drug, the barbiturate. And something did go wrong here, and it needs to be investigated. That having been said, Mr. Lockett lived 15 years after killing his victim, and we're worrying about 40 minutes versus 4 minutes for the execution. It needs to be kept in context.
So are you saying, are you defending the process of what happened here?
Oh, of course not. Of course not. No, the governor did the right thing by putting off the 8 p.m. execution. The governor did the right thing by ordering an investigation.
Deborah Denno, is there a way to assure that this kind of thing never happens?
Well, one way to try to prevent something like this from happening is not having all this secrecy. It's pretty clear that this incident should never have happened and probably would not have happened if the attorneys had been given proper information. I also think it's very important to separate the actual execution process from the death penalty itself. It's very clear that Mr. Lockett was guilty of what he did, but nothing should happen like this to an inmate as a form of punishment.
What do you mean when you say if the attorneys had been given more information? Why would that have made a difference?
Well, if the attorneys had known the source of the drug, they could have seen if the drug had been tested, if the drug had been expired. These are all very important questions to know whether or not the drug is inhumane. Also, it doesn't stop there. Who performed this execution? What were their qualifications? All of this is in a big veil of secrecy that should not exist. It should be a transparent process.
And Roy Englert, we know that a number of states do keep it a